Hello, my name is Alexis J, and I am the Independent Chair of the Centre for Excellence for Looked After Children in Scotland and the author of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Exploitation in Rotherham. Can You Stop It has been created as a follow-up film from its predecessor, Can You See It, which focused on the peer-on-peer experience of CSE victims. This film aims to focus upon on-street CSE perpetrator behaviour. It is important for professionals to fully understand and appreciate how perpetrators establish and maintain control of their victims. Can You Stop It identifies key typologies, behaviours and ways of working to help professionals recognise and prevent child sexual exploitation at the earliest opportunity. You are now about to hear from a young person who was a victim of CSE.
Well, I was first started talking to a group of young boys, so they were still of school age. So that made me trust them and automatically feel safe. I started talking to them and I built a friendship with them. And then they started to introduce older people to me. And they gradually got older and older till they were in the 20s. What then happened is I started to spend all my time with them. And it had also gone from seeing them once a week to seeing them every day after school and all weekend. Also, one of my friends who I went to school with and who I grew up with, she was being groomed by the same perpetrators and she already knew the older men before me, so she'd already got a connection to them.
On-street CSE perpetrators can offend alone or with others. In that sense, their offending is premeditated and semi-organised. On-street CSE perpetrators are usually acquaintances of their victims. They can even be relatives of those victims. Bernardo's Puppet on a String document, 2011, introduced 3 methods of on-street grooming. When you apply behavioural analysis techniques to these methods, you can identify 3 typologies: the hook, the predator, the coordinator. The hook is a covert exploiter. They usually pose as boyfriends to their potential victims. They often pass those victims on to other males. They are considered attractive by those victims, and they are often subordinate to older, more senior males within the group. They may not necessarily have a sexual interest in children themselves.
Yeah, teenage girls and some boys are attracted to me. I'm all about projecting a certain image and I suppose a lifestyle. They see the designer clothes, the bling and the sporty car and they want to be a part of it. I always make a point of having plenty of cash on me at all times and I make sure they see it. I suppose the girls see me as a potential boyfriend. I just drop a couple of compliments and she's just going to believe everything I say. They like it and that's what they want.
When the adult men come along, they were just so more exciting. They drove cars. You know, they seemed to be able to offer me a lot more than what a child could. They seemed a lot more sophisticated. They treated me more as an adult than the younger boys did. They always had a lot of cash on them, quite large amounts of cash. They were always dressed in very expensive clothes. Money wasn't an object, which is also another thing that, you know, pulls you in. And also it made me different from everybody else I went to school with as well, because I was hanging around with older people and I got picked up in cars, and not just cars, but nice cars.
So hook-like behaviour can be seen differently with each young person. Often what they'll do is they will find out what the young person is interested in, and that's what they will use to hook them in. They can then provide gifts that are related to that subject matter, or they can take them on trips that are related to that subject matter. And when they take them on trips or take them to parties, that's when they start to introduce them to other people. So they're often in a position of trust or position of respect or position of fame within that area or within that peer group.
The predator is a covert and overt exploiter. There is often an inappropriate age difference between them and their victims, and an obvious power imbalance between them and their victims. They are highly likely to have a sexual interest in children. Their main objective is to have sexual contact with their victims.
There are a number of young guys who have connections with teenage girls. Now, they introduce me and others to the girls, sometimes at parties, but more usually they just bring them along to my house or a friend's place, and we have sex with them. Sometimes the young guys are not happy to pass a girl on, and you have to remind them to show some respect and put them in their place. Often the girls are willing to do stuff for money, drugs, booze. And it's a lot easier when the girl is younger because they believe everything more quickly. Yeah. But if they show any signs of backing out, might have to be a bit more forceful. Sometimes it can get nasty. And occasionally they might get roughed up a bit.
So I trusted these younger guys already, so straight away I trusted the older ones because they were sort of friends of friends. So they'd already got some relationship going on with them. They weren't like strangers. And that's how I got sort of passed up, really. And not only were they giving alcohol and drugs and could supply alcohol and drugs, but they were supplying it for what I thought was free. And then what happened is I also then built a debt up for my drugs and alcohol. So in the end, I didn't want to be there, but I felt I had no other choice because I owed them money for drugs and alcohol, and I also was frightened of them because of the level of violence that they used.
I think one of the most important things about predators within CSE, especially within groups, is that the other people in the group might not necessarily understand their behaviours or see them as predators. And that predator will be looking for girls who they can exploit, boys who they can exploit, but also a group where they can exploit within, who won't understand, won't challenge, and won't be going to the police to tell what's happened. It's a normalised behaviour and one that can be manipulated by the predator at all times. The age gap between the predator and the hooks is sometimes just a couple of years. It doesn't have to be a lot older.
But even if they're not actually huge distance in age, there might be a huge distance in power because the perpetrator believes he has this sense of entitlement that he deserves to get whatever he wants off a young female, and that actually her opinion or her well-being doesn't come into account at all.
But even the men in the 30s, they didn't come across as 30-year-olds or in the 30s. They were still like fun and exciting, and they sort of acted like kids themselves, really, and they liked the stuff I did. And every time I was introduced to somebody else, they were always really, really friendly.
They need to be seen as part of the normal group, otherwise they're not going to be trusted. They're not going to be as influential if the actual young people are recognising them as a predator. I think the predator role is a very complex role, and it is not simply the girls or the victims that are being manipulated. Often it is the hook who is being manipulated as well. So the hook will be being used by the predator in order to provide girls, and they may be doing that as a result of gaining respect or status within that group, or gaining payment, or just getting a reputation or making some money, but they may not truly understand what they're getting involved with.
The coordinator is a covert exploiter who manages and directs the sexual abuse of victims. They may have a financial or a vested interest in the sexual abuse of those victims. They may have a sexual interest in children. They may also be involved in the transportation of victims themselves or task others to do so.
I transport the girls to parties and meetings. I usually take a couple of girls at a time, and then I make sure they get home safe. Depending on the girl, I may also have sex with her. They go there thinking like they're going to meet one or two guys, and it's like 6, 7 of them. And then they can't say no. Sometimes the guys pay me up front, and for others, it's simply a payback for a favour or some other type of work. Yeah, you do kind of get a rep. People know that I'm the one that can get all the girls. And come to me if you need things like that.
The people who picked me up and transported me were the ones who had organised it. And then where they would take me to properties and there would be older men there, I would be the only female and the only child as well there. And then more men would come. And then there'd be things such as what they would do is they would lock me in a bedroom and every man that was in that property would be sent in the bedroom one by one. So every man that come to that property was there to come and see me for some reason that was sexual. They also happened in parks, they also happened in town centres, in alleyways, so quite out in the open as well, and not just sort of underground in properties. People would pull up in cars, men in cars, and you'd have to get in the car with them. And whatever they wanted, you'd have to give them, and you won't even know the name, and you'd never see them again.
But also they might be doing it to pay off a favour as well, or because they owe money, they might be getting money from it. And say if they owe something to someone else who's of a higher status, if they then organise the sexual exploitation of young females, that might be paying off some kind of debt or getting back up to the status that they want to get to.
Remember, one person can act as more than one type of perpetrator. For example, they can be a boyfriend to a victim, they can have sex with the victim, and then they can pass that victim on to other people. In that sense, they act as the hook, the predator, and the coordinator. Given that there are an infinite number of scenarios that demonstrate how CSE on-street perpetrators control and manage their victims, both physically and psychologically, it is best to remember this by using the mnemonic VIPER. Violence, intimidation, persuasion, aggression.
So it's really important for us as professionals to know that a lot of violence is non-physical, so it's the emotional and the psychological violence that enables the physical violence to happen. So that by the time any sexual or physical violence starts, the female's confidence is so low that she believes that this is what she deserves, this is her lot.
The violence that they would use is, a lot of it was sexual violence, so like quite brutal rapes. They would be violent in the way that they would hit you. So violence was part of every day.
So intimidation could be displaying weapons around them. It could be smashing up where they're living, for example, or breaking their belongings. So it's like the physical violence isn't on the actual victim, but the victim gets a clear understanding that this person can use physical violence.
They would phone my house phone, they would follow my parents, they would park outside my house, and that would intimidate my family, but most importantly it would make me feel that my family was unsafe. So that sort of intimidation as well would be used. And they would then use persuasion instead of violence to get you to perform sexual acts on them or to perform sexual acts on other people within the group.
So it could be using money, could be using drugs, giving them free drugs, and then later flipping it and saying, well, now you owe me. And that happens a lot, young people being given free drugs, males and females. And yeah, money as well, so that the young person feels looked after, and then that's used to say, well, now obviously you owe me, or I've looked after you, now you look after me.
They were always quite aggressive. The behaviour was quite aggressive. The attitude was very aggressive and quite abrupt as well. So the aggression was always there. They wouldn't only just be aggressive towards you, but you'd also see them be aggressive towards other people within the gang or other young girls as well. So they were always aggressive.
What most perpetrators do is find one tactic that works for a particular victim. Sometimes they will vary those tactics. Some offenders will use all four to manipulate and groom and cajole their victims into doing what they want them to do. If you can see those behaviours and recognise them early, you will be able to intervene and prevent children from being manipulated and controlled by these perpetrators.
It's really important that if you have a concern over someone who's potentially perpetrating CSE, that you go and report that to someone. It's a really difficult thing to go and report something like that, especially if you haven't got specific evidence. But a gut feeling about someone, a range of incidents that make you feel uncomfortable, that you're unsure about, check them out with someone, whether that's your manager, whether that is someone that you know who would have information about this kind of stuff. But ultimately, you should really be going to the police, so at least they can take that information down, keep it on file and do some further investigations.
You can't effectively intervene in a process that you don't understand. Once you understand it, it demystifies the subject and it allows you to make effective, timely interventions and to make defensible decisions. And that's all we're really asking professionals to do.
If you're working in a school or a youth club, for example, you need to be making a list of sexually inappropriate behaviours that people are displaying, and you need to be looking for patterns within that list. If it's a one-off incident with a young person that isn't sexually violent towards another young person, but is something that you're concerned about, you need to write it down and you need to check it out with someone.
On-street child sexual exploitation has become a complex process and a difficult crime to investigate. The purpose of this film was to simplify that process and give professionals practical advice and guidance. By remembering the 3 levels of on-street perpetrator behaviour, i.e. the hook, the predator, the coordinator, and also remembering how predators manage and groom on-street victims by using the mnemonic VIPER, violence, intimidation, persuasion and aggression. The hope is that practitioners will learn from these methods and apply them to make effective interventions in their practice.
We called this video, Can You Stop It? Because if you know what to look for, you will have a much better chance of preventing and stopping child sexual exploitation. Professionals need to be vigilant, as perpetrators of CSE come in different guises, but in essence, their aim is the same: to take advantage of those most vulnerable and sexually exploit them for their own needs or for the needs of others. It is your personal and professional responsibility to understand and use the referral pathways available to you in order to help young people at risk. A young person you know may need your help. You have the power to help that young person, so please use it. And remember, you can stop it.